In a case of irony, a California man who, under the new executive orders introduced by President Obama, signed into law by Barack Obama yesterday, would not have been able to get a gun, who ended up going on a shooting spree in his apartment complex because of Obama. So let's get to the story. Reported in Raw Story and the Record Spotlight. Witnesses apparently had called 911 on Tuesday to report an unnamed 50-year-old white man firing indiscriminately at his apartment building in Redding. Now, one of the neighbors, goes by the name of Kathy Lunsford, who lived in the building, was one of this man's neighbors, said he grabbed her and pulled her into his apartment before shooting. Quote, as soon as he shut the door, he hugged me and kissed me on the forehead, said Lunsford. She said her neighbor then fired at another man while she begged him to stop. He was aiming at a guy, and then he just got sloppy. He was shooting everywhere. Why? Well, why would you go on a random shooting spree for no reason? Well, because Obama, obviously. Witnesses said that the gunman was ranting incoherently about gun control proposed by Barack Obama, who, of course, did these executive actions earlier that same day to keep guns from being sold to, well, criminals and the mentally ill. Two things that this man just happened to fall into. But first, witnesses on the scene described it as, we heard the 5 shots and everyone was screaming. He came out screaming, Obama, Obama, Obama. Police then told him to come out with his hands up, and he kept telling them no. Apparently this man had been seen going in and out of his apartment armed at least 10 times in front of cops. They were super patient with this guy. But on the overall point, this kind of proves Obama's point. You're ranting against gun control while obviously showing everybody the need for it. Once again, somewhat ironic. Now, the Record Spotlight reported that this man identified on a search warrant at the apartment had some prior felony convictions, which of course would have prevented him from legally owning a gun, and perhaps he wouldn't be able to get it. See, under the old background check system, background checks weren't exactly as strong as they should be. So it was possible that he would be able to get a gun fairly easily, either without having to do a background check to get it, maybe through one of the loopholes, perhaps the gun show loophole. He would have been able to get a gun. Under these new background check systems, he might have been caught, and therefore denied a gun. Now, court records showed that this man pleaded no contest in 2009 to the illegal discharge of a weapon and was sentenced to 60 days in jail. Now, he was also sentenced to an additional 45 days in jail the following year for breaking his probation. So, this guy did this before. He didn't shoot up his apartment complex, but he went around firing his gun randomly and got arrested for it. Well, that's one thing you're not supposed to do. If you're a responsible gun owner, you're not supposed to randomly discharge your weapon. That's dumb. But that's what he did. Now, he had also had a misdemeanor battery charge dismissed in 2004 after he was placed on probation. Now, to add the mental illness thing into this, because once again, President Obama's executive orders wanted to do something as well about mental health. He actually gave or allocated $500 million to be able to increase mental health for people and to allow background checks to have those, to see if you are mentally ill. Now, a longtime friend of this man said that he suffered from depression, anger, and bouts of confusion for many years, and he said those mental issues were probably the cause of his legal problems. Well, sure. Well, that makes sense. If you're angry, depressed, and confused, and if you're all those three at the same time, it makes more sense that you would just randomly pull out your gun and start shooting into the air like a crazy person. Well, because you are a crazy person. Now, I don't know how he got his hands on that gun, and that kind of disturbs me. But it is pretty clear, based on his record, based on his troubles that he has had, that he shouldn't have had a gun in the first place. This is why background checks are important. Now, unfortunately, because he did get a hold of this gun and he decided to use it, he's now dead. Now, first officers, to their credit, fired beanbags. Non-lethal, they tried non-lethal methods. They tried to get him to drop his weapon after reportedly walking in and out of his apartment at least 10 times. And finally, one time, the last time, he came out of his apartment with his gun drawn. At that time, the police had had enough, and they ended up shooting and killing him. And besides, this is right after, according to a neighbor, the man had warned police that he was armed and he did intend to shoot them. So, they first tried to non-lethal methods, and they gave him plenty of time to surrender. That's actually what we want. And the fatal shots were fired only when the man presented to be a complete danger to the officers. Now let's contrast that real quick here to a case in Ohio where a 12-year-old was shot in less than 2 seconds for having a pellet gun. The differences in these cases couldn't be more stark. Now I wonder what the other difference was in this case. 50-year-old white man versus Tamir Rice. I'm just saying. Now look, this guy had mental illness and he had a felony. These are the very people that President Obama and liberals like me are trying to keep from getting guns. We don't want to take guns from the rest of you. We just want to make sure that the people who shouldn't have guns don't have guns. The people who are mentally disturbed and will do things like this get help that they need so they don't cause a danger to not only other people around them, but to themselves. I mean, look, it's not just for everyone else's safety. Police had actually killed, in 2015, they've shot and killed at least 124 people who had histories of mental illness. A lot of people shot in 2015. About a third of them had some sort of mental illness. And they're being killed by police because most of them, unfortunately, were able to get their hands on a gun. And they were a clear and present danger to police officers who had to take fatal, deadly action. It's not just for our safety, man. It's for theirs. If you're mentally ill, you shouldn't have a gun. That is, and look, there are varying degrees. I get that. Somebody with depression, okay, look, we can talk about that. I'm not talking about a blanket ban on people who have any sort of mental illness because, I mean, you could get pretty broad in what is considered mental illness. But if you have a history of violent crime combined with angry outbursts and anxiety or I don't even know if anxiety, maybe that's too far. I don't know, but it's a conversation worth having. That's all I'm trying to say. Now, some criminals, some people will, of course, find a way to get guns, right? And that's the argument that we hear all the time. And sure, there's truth in that. But doesn't it make sense to make it maybe a little bit more difficult for people with these afflictions or people with violent histories, criminal histories, to get guns? Even if that means that you and I, people who, are law-abiding gun owners, who just want to get their weapons, well, we have to wait an extra day just to pick it up. I don't mind that. It may be annoying. You might be impatient. But even Ronald Reagan, even St. Ronnie, didn't think that that was infringing upon your Second Amendment rights to have to wait an extra day to pick up your gun. For me, as I mentioned, I'd be happy to wait an extra day for a thorough background check, as long as if it means someone like this guy won't be able to get their hands on a gun and endanger other people as well as himself. It seems, in O'Reilly's words, makes sense.